The two-dimensional array allows you to store data that's organized in a table format as rows and columns. You can think of a spreadsheet as an example of data that's organized in rows and columns. The way we declare a two-dimensional array is by providing a set of brackets for the rows and a set of brackets for the columns, and then in the constructor call, actually specifying a size. So for example, here I'm creating a 5 by 5 array of numbers, 5 rows by 5 columns. And of course, what I would probably want to do, if this was a real program, is create a couple of variables. Rows and calls, and then use those final variables in my declaration. Once I've declared my two-dimensional array in this manner, I can assign data to it. A normal way to do that would be to use nested for loops. The outer loop is going to control what row I'm on, going from the first row to the last row. The inner loop will then control the columns as I sweep across the row from column 1 to column 2 to column 3. Keeping in mind that the numbers of rows and columns, the actual positions themselves, both start with the number 0, just like most things that we do. So the loop would work like this. For int r equals 0, r less than rows, plus r. Then I might say for int c equals 0, c less than calls, plus c. And then inside the body of this loop would be where I would actually create my array. Now, because I want to actually create an array, I'm going to go back and add the random class so I can just assign some random numbers. A lot easier than trying to think of numbers to put in or do it some other way programmatically. And it's just taking me a second to do this. All right. So here, inside the inner loop, by specifying RC as my row and column positions, and then assigning a random number like so. So what will happen is we'll start again at row 0, column 0, and assign the first number. Then we'll go to row 0, column 1, assign the next number, and then row 0, column 2, and then row 0, column 3, and then row 0, column 4. And then we've used up the first row or assigned data to all the elements of the first row, so then we drop down to the second row, and so on and so forth. So that would be one way to assign data. Another way to assign data to a two-dimensional array is to use an initialization list. And it'll look like this. I'm just going to do some simple numbers here. And what I'm doing is I'm putting each row into a list inside a bigger list. So as you'll see, the first row is 10, 20, 30, 40. The second row is 20, 30, 40, 50. I'm going to do one more row, 30, 40, 50, 60. I'll stop there. And then close off the statement. Let's compile that real quick. Clear my screen first. We can't run it. We have nothing to run. I just wanted to make sure that it compiled. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to actually access the elements. So to review, we can create a two-dimensional array by specifying two sets of brackets for rows and columns in our declaration statement, and then specifying the number of rows and the number of columns in the constructor part of the declaration. Then we can assign numbers randomly, in this case, by using a set of nested for loops, where the outer loop controls moving through the rows and the inner loop controls moving through the columns and performing the data assignment, which is this statement right there. A second way to declare and initialize a two-dimensional array is to use an initialization list, where you have an outer list that is the total array, and then you have an inner list where you're assigning one row at a time. So this first set is the first row, 10 through 40. This set is the second row, 20 through 50. And this last set is the third row, 30 through 60. So that's how you declare and initialize two-dimensional arrays. In the next lesson, we're going to look at how to actually access the data in a two-dimensional array and perform some sort of task.